crit success. Oh, hey, didn't see you there.
You said crit success before you rolled it. Crit success. Oh, hey.
And then oh, hey, didn't see you there.
That was a 2. That was...
Hi, this is Matt. And Will.
Am I introducing myself, or are you introducing both of us?
Hey, this is Matt and Will. Or do we want me introducing both of us, or what's better? What's better?
You do it a couple of takes and see what happens.
Okay.
Start all the way over.
No, we're not. I mean, this isn't the actual intro. Hi, it's Matt and Will with Downtime Activities, here to give you a top 12 video.
We're going over the top 12 classes in the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Player's Handbook.
Before we dive right into that top 12 list, we're going to start off with an honorable mention. The Artificer class was not ever released in the Player's Handbook. It was an Unearthed Arcana, and then it was in Eberron, I believe, and then it's actually official now because of Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. If it was eligible for the top 12 list, it would snipe the number 1 spot for sure. It is my personal favorite class, and one of the most robust, interesting, evocative, and varied classes. It can fill pretty much any role in a party really, really well. You can do a lot of damage with the artillerist. You could be like a Hulkbuster Iron Man tank with the armorer. And you could also fill the healer role in the party really well with the alchemist, being able to make healing potions as well as other support stuff. I mean, they are the best support class in the game by a long shot, I think, with a combination of really good support spells, utility magic items they can craft with their infusions, and all that on top of the most tool proficiencies, including Thieves' Tool. So Rogue, forget about it. We've got one with the Artificer on top of everything else they can do.
Well, you eventually get proficiency with every tool, don't
I think you get expertise with just about every tool before you're done leveling up through the Artificer tree. And it's just so cool. There's so many different... you can kind of be the mad scientist or the like I said, the Iron Man. You can be this crazy hermit out in the woods brewing potions. There's so many different ways you can go with it. It combines utility, power, and really interesting and unique and expressive character concepts really, really well.
And I think it's a class that multi-classes very well with a lot of others.
Definitely.
It's, absolutely high up on the list, if not number 1, if it was in the PHP.
It could be on the list, but
it is worth mentioning because it's a very good class.
Definitely.
My finger itches so bad. Okay. All right. That problem was solved. Ooh.
That's going in something.
Oh, great. Coming in at number 1, we have Barbarian. Barbarian's always been one of my favorite classes since I started playing D&D. It's kind of the classic martial class. It's a great mix of DPS and tank, and you can build it into either of those roles super well.
Or both, a lot of the time.
Yeah. And the rage feature in particular that they get, which is kind of the hallmark of the class, just makes them better at both with flat damage resistances and bonus damage. And then at higher levels, it can make your character nearly impossible to kill.
You're so angry you can't die.
Yeah.
And you will kill everything in your path.
I mean, low-level barbarians can one-shot a lot of starting-level enemies pretty easily, and high-level barbarians can take on armies by themselves. It's a class that people sort of immediately have images for.
You have your classic, like, Conans and stuff like that just are very... you think barbarian, you think of the big, hulking, great sword, kicking a door down, but you could go a lot of different directions with barbarians. They can be very spiritual, very ancestral, very tribalistic, or they can be drunks who are just so angry that they're going to crack skulls no matter who gets in their way.
The Totem Warrior has a lot of utility in particular, as well as some sort of tank and DPS focused abilities, whereas the Berserker Barbarian is all about sort of honing in on that rage feature and just sort of supercharging it in a way.
It's just the most barbarian.
It's
just very, very angry, and it can be even more angry and even more hard-hitting at some kind of detriment to you. Don't care about yourself anymore. You're all about crushing the enemy.
And it's one of the ones that they've added a lot to with the various expansions. both official and unofficial. A lot of new archetypes have come for it, and it's one of the classes that I think just multi-classes in really interesting ways with a lot of other classes. Some people might consider it kind of a flavor fail if you're multi-classing like barbarian and spellcasters, but I think almost any combination just makes for a really interesting character.
Yeah, the rage feature can kind of get in the way because you can't do a lot of spell stuff while you're raging, but that doesn't mean you can't have cast spells at some point and then rage in other certain situations. They're very versatile, and with increased movement speed, unarmored defense, all these kind of features that are just useful for any character, you can go a lot of ways with it. And that's why it takes the number 1 spot.
For sure.
Coming in at number 1, it's going to be the Bard. Bard, what can you say about the Bard? Jack of all trades, master of all trades, pretty much. You know, they're the face of the party. They have full spell casting progression. If you do the lore Bard, then you get to kind of pick and choose a couple spells from all the spell lists and just take whatever the best thing is for whatever your character concept is. They're cool, they're suave, they've got instruments, they've got performance. Your performance can be so many different things. You could be an author, you could be a performer, dancing, singing, playing an instrument. There's really no limit to it, and they're just insanely powerful. Even without the lore bard's list of like stealing from other lists, their list of spells from the start is really useful in and out of combat.
I think they've been the best support class in D&D, at least all through 5th edition. I'm not as familiar with earlier editions. I know you guys played like 3.5 back in the day, but having a bard in the party can just like sort of skate around a lot of problems sometimes. It's they can just easily become, even like not considering any of the stuff that's been added to bard since 5th edition came out with which is
a lot.
It's got a lot of new archetypes and some really flavorful archetypes as well, but just the default PHB bard is just a really overlooked and powerful class a lot of times.
I think a lot of people see the bard and they think kind of like this frilly, like, oh, they just, play their drums, they blow on their flute and dance around, and they're like seen as very like non-serious or non-cool bad, characters. But they, like I said, there's just so many different directions you can go with them, and you can really kind of focus in on an art form of some sort and just make that be how you express your character in so many different ways. And if you're an artistic person to begin with, if you're a performer, if you're a musician, then you can kind of translate that into the game too in really cool and fun RP ways.
Oh, for sure. And best piece of art in the PHB.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt, the like heavy metal, dark elf in dark clothes, like you look at that and you're like, I want to be a cool bard. I want to be that cool bard.
Yeah, it is the best character art in maybe any of the Dungeons and Dragons books. It might be going a little far, but
it's up there.
It's
up
very good.
And you also get to, classic bard. You sleep with all the problems. Whatever you can't.
Roll to seduce the dragon.
Yeah.
Did you say sleep with all the problems?
Yeah.
All right, other man in here to talk about the number 1 pick, cleric. What can you say about clerics? They're a full caster. They have the best healing. Probably the best support class in the game. I know we've said that about every caster so far. Anyway, they're the best support class in the game. Oh, what do you have to say about clerics?
They're hard to beat. Unmatched in healing, obviously. Unmatched in damage, depending on which type of archetype you pick. You can be one in full plate with martial weapon proficiencies and still have a full spellcasting progression with some really, really strong spells. And they kind of do it all, and they do it all really, really well. It's hard to go wrong. And they just have the most archetype options because there's so many different domains that the gods can cover that you can do almost any character with them really well.
Not to mention Divine Intervention at 10th level is, it's basically just Wish, right?
Every time it works, and it's going to be that every time.
When it works, it's Wish, right?
Basically.
Isn't there like a 10% chance?
Eventually it works every time, but we don't
when it works.
When it works, 10% of the time, it works every time.
It works if you believe.
That's the power of cleric.
Yeah.
In first place, we have Druid.
What do you say about Druid?
The most powerful class at second level.
That goes without saying. Moon Druid,
It's
biggest, baddest.
both of Druid's archetypes are powerful, but as you just said, Moon Druid, especially early game, is incredible.
It's
Druid's
unmatched.
big hallmark is the ability to turn into animals with its wild shape feature, and Circle of the Moon focuses on that and just supercharges it in a really...
Speeds the clock up for how big of a monster, a beast you can turn into quickly.
You can turn into, CR1 creatures at level 2? We should probably know that if we're going to just say it.
Is it CR1?
Is it CR1?
Or is it CR1 half?
I think it's...
Let's play D&D, which is reading books and doing math.
I get CR1 at level 2.
Is it CR1?
Because I think it's half your...
That seems insane.
Yes, it is. Because I think it's half your CR, or it's half your level in CR, isn't it?
Is it really? Normally it's 1/4, but their thing... Are they... Yada yada. Transform into a piece of challenging as high as 1. Second level. Well, there you go. 1.
Yep.
It's 1. CR1. Yeah, very
CR1.
powerful. Very, very powerful. And the crazy thing about Druid is, to me, the wild shape, especially with Circle of the Moon, super powerful. And it's kind of their highlighted ability, but they are still a full spell casting progression, really good spell list, in and out of combat utility. Any beast-related encounters, fighting or otherwise, they're just incredibly well suited for. Moving through nature, they're very, very powerful, very interesting, very cool.
And the way Wild Shape works with having to burn through the animal's hit points before it even touches yours sort of gives them the ability to tank for the party, especially like turning into like a grizzly bear or something. Mm-hmm. And their healing can be really powerful. They already just have a D8 for their hit dice, which is, for a full spellcaster like the cleric, is kind of in that same boat. It's just like, that really ends up giving them a big advantage over a lot of the others.
4 people stand around and hold your lights.
Ooh.
Oh, shit.
Did the camera pick that up?
That's really gonna zoom in.
Woo! All right.
Right over there.
I feel great. I feel alive.
Just like our number 1 pick.
Just like our number 1 pick. Awake and alive. That describes the fighter, usually. Anyway, so just overtaking the rest of the list to steal the number 1 spot, it's going to be the fighter. The fighter gets a bad rap as kind of being the white bread, like they're just a dude in armor with a sword, basic D&D character. But where some would say basic, I would say classic. You can't go wrong with a fighter. They are robust, they can be up in the front, they can be strong, they can be hard to hit, they can be in the back with bow and arrow, with ranged attacks. They are the ultimate weapon-using martial class. And the big thing for them is extra feats or ability score improvements.
A lot of extra feats and ability score improvements.
And to top it off, the most attacks in the game. Every other class caps off when they get their first multi-attack. Fighter, they end up with 4? 5 at 20th? 5?
Cameraman saying
4
with a shrug.
4.
Right? I'm pretty sure it's 4 at the end.
I think it gets a
4.
We already did the walk-off camera gag, so we keep it.
4.
Attacks.
That's
insane. Throw an enchantment on a weapon and do that, that's going to be insane damage. And all that on top of just a bunch of hit points, hard to hit, the full swath of options for weapon and armor.
And it's clear a lot of the feats in 5th edition were built for fighters.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of stuff with armor proficiencies or like maximizing your ability kind of with certain types of weapons. It's obvious that like those were meant to go together.
Yeah, I mean, you've got, if you're going for your classic sword and board tank fighter, you could be doing shield master feats and all those kind of things. You could be doing your great weapon fighting. You could be doing archery and go for the sharpshooter. And they're very, very strong, albeit sometimes kind of simplified compared to other classes, but there's nothing wrong with that. And you can even throw spellcasting in if you want with an Eldritch Knight, which gives some really cool options for additional effects you can add.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a relatively short list that they can choose from, but it tends to be pretty good abilities, and I think people who are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and the way a lot of the spellcasting works are going to be able to make really interesting choices with that limited spell list and get a lot of use out of it.
And it gives evocation and abjuration, which, I mean, what more do you want as a fighter anyways? Like, I can shoot fire in case the guy's further than my sword reaches, and I can make myself harder to hit. You know, it's hard to go wrong with the fighter class.
Oh, I'm back. I'm here to talk about our number 1 pick, which is the monk, who, you know, it's basically Bruce Lee. They have to move really fast, get all punchy. Sometimes you're the last airbender and you get to be an elemental monk and you're like shooting fire and blowing the wind and throwing water on people. Blowing the wind and throwing them on. Yeah. I said what I said. Oh, you get to pick up rocks too. That's the 4th element.
You're not allowed to pick up rocks unless you play.
You get this ability called Stunning Strike, where you get to just make an enemy just miss a turn. Hopefully.
Shadow Monk is
very anime, but very cool.
Very cool. Turning invisible in shadow at a certain level, teleporting to shadows. Monks can run up walls and across water.
Oh, and you stop aging, and you don't need to eat anymore. You become like immortal, right?
I think you still age. You just don't have the effects of aging.
I think you just age slower.
Alright, quick editor's note. Turns out monks and druids both get abilities called Timeless Body. At 15th level, monks no longer suffer any effects from aging, but can still die of old age, and they also don't need food or water anymore. And at 18th level, druids only age 1 year for every 10 years that pass.
That was powerful, wasn't it? Wouldn't you agree?
For sure.
Definitely. What's our next one?
Number 1, top class, Paladin.
It earns it.
It is one of the highest DPS classes in the system with its Divine Smites. It gets an excellent mix of utility and like damage spellcasting. The whole class is really a good mix of team utility, DPS, and party tank. It kind of fills all those roles.
They get to kind of be a classic like knight in shining armor, except, you know, sometimes they're riding on like a Pegasus and they're all angelic and stuff, and maybe the best kind of like heavy armor, like AC tank possible in the game. And, you know, a critical hit and then adding Divine Strike to that can be some insane burst damage coming out of your tank.
And their archetypes are relatively varied. You have kind of just the classic Paladin, a more naturey one with Oath of the Ancients, and then Oath of Vengeance is all about not letting your enemies escape, really.
Oath of Vengeance is the best one.
It's just a lot of kind of battlefield control in a lot of ways.
Your enemies will fear you, but you won't let them run. And coming in at number 1, the Ranger. Oh, you're here.
Hey, yeah, Ranger, number 1 class. It gets some hate. I know the Beastmaster Ranger is seen as kind of like not as strong as a lot of the other classes, and there's definitely some issues there, but overall, the Ranger's at the top of the list. Nothing else can beat it out. You know, it's high DPS. It can fill some of the roles that like a rogue does a lot of the times, with being able to sneak and scout, and honestly, a lot of the time scout better than the rogue can. And high damage output. Best archers in the game, definitely.
And if your party spends any amount of time out traipsing around in the woods, the Ranger will be invaluable. Ranger gets some really cool spells that pretty much only they get, right? You know, like Hunter's Mark? I don't think any other class gets Hunter's Mark, do they?
I think there's probably weird ways that you could get it from, like, the Bard or whatever.
Sure, the Bard could take it, but...
Anyway, Hunter's Mark is just an amazing spell for any martial class. You get a bonus action plus a d6 on your attack. I mean, extra damage, especially when you're shooting it down from range, which a lot of Rangers will be doing with a longbow or a crossbow or whatever. It's a lot of damage, and... although the Beastmaster does get some hate, it can be a really cool and powerful class too, and especially if you use your companion as more of a utility companion instead of just going for, I want a bear or a wolf to claw people for me. Having like a scouting hawk or something along those lines can be really useful for the party.
And if you've got an awesome, intelligent pet, you can't discount the power of friendship there.
So, while it gets a bad rap, Ranger, definitely number 1 on our top 12 list.
For sure. What else am I saying?
Whatever the transition is, because my ideas aren't good enough. Oh, Will, welcome back. There is nobody I can think of better to introduce our number 1 pick than you. And that number 1 pick, the Rogue. Why is the Rogue the best?
Rogue is my favorite class in D&D. It was the first character I ever played, was a Rogue. They're a fantastic mix of really utility and DPS. It's hard to build a tank Rogue, but that's fine. Characters don't need to be everything.
Especially if they're really, really good at what they are. And
They
the Rogue is that.
start with a lot of skill proficiencies, and their ability to expertise skill like double their proficiency with certain skills, makes them, at least at later levels, essentially unstoppable at certain things. Like whatever they decide to specialize in, they're unbeatable at it. And
they'll almost never fail at it.
yeah, especially past 11th level, where they sort of have a minimum they can roll on any skill they're proficient in, is just a super, super powerful ability. They all get really good capstone abilities for all the different archetypes.
They do.
The Arcane Trickster gets a little bit of kind of fun niche spellcasting.
Trickery, enchantment, and illusion and stuff.
And like Invisible Mage Hand and stuff like that. Assassin Rogue is awesome.
It's a lot of damage.
Erickson,
a lot of damage.
like usual, recently figured out how to break that one.
It's not hard to do with the
No,
assassin.
it's-
You don't have to look
it's not
very hard.
hard. It's
You
not-
read
it's-
their 3rd level
yeah.
ability and you're like, oh, that's breaking the game. That's a lot of damage. And we talk about their skill proficiencies and how good those are, but the reason the assassin is so good is because they're getting auto crits, and the rogue's big ability, sneak attack.
Yeah.
Sneak attack, additional damage dice as long as you meet certain parameters, and it adds a lot of dice, especially when you're auto-critting with that assassinate ability. It makes them one of the best, if not the best, damage dealers in the game, on top of all their utility with all their skill
Both at
proficiencies.
range and in melee combat. They're very, very dangerous. Thief is kind of an odd one for the rogues archetypes, in that it's not nearly as specialized as the other two, but its abilities are kind of more flavorful and a lot more out of combat than Arcane Trickster and Assassins are. And at high levels, Thief becomes really interesting with its ability to ignore most requirements on magic items.
It's like, oh yeah, Staff of the Archmagi? Like, yeah, sure. I just kind of smacks it against the wall a couple times and shoots a fireball out of it. Like, he just doesn't care. And that's late game. If you're playing a high-level D&D, there's some really powerful shenanigans you can get up to with that. Topping off our list, number 1, the cream of the crop.
Cream of the crop.
The Sorcerer. What is there to say about the Sorcerer? It is super cool, super powerful. They don't have to try. They're not a wizard. They're not studying. They literally just are born super magical and super powerful. Someone in their bloodline had some sort of interaction, whatever that may be, and they've got dragon blood. They've got, chaos blood, in their bloodstream chaos. And the Chaos Sorcerer, while maybe not as powerful as the Draconic Sorcerer, super cool, super fun, and can make some really wacky situations.
It is a very dangerous archetype, early game, even to your own party. It's the type of class that when I read through it in the PHB, I immediately want to play that character. Like, I just immediately get ideas for it.
Oh, yeah.
Sorcerer is fantastic. And their ability to, twist magic in a way that's just totally
Using their
unique.
sorcery points, meta magic options. Very, very powerful. I'm sure anyone who's played and has had a sorcerer near them knows that, empowering spells, quickening spells. There's lots of different abilities they have to change the way the spell works, making it harder to save, getting to cast more spells in a turn. They're super powerful. They're kind of glass cannons, but if you do the Draconic Sorcerer, you get extra hit points, extra AC, and you're just they're just kind of cannons, not really glass cannons.
Yeah.
And then they have super high payload, big damage spells. It's a little bit smaller of a list, and you don't have as many that you know as some of the other classes, but it allows you to really pick and tailor a spell list to the kind of character you're going for. If you have dragon blood and it's a red dragon that breathes fire, then you're casting only a couple really powerful toned up fire spells, and it's just really cool. It makes for a really cool character.
They're daddy's boys.
Okay, that came out wrong.
Jesus Christ!
That came out so wrong!
I'm so unsettled.
No, I mean, that they just get their magical powers from their daddy. That they didn't have to work for.
I'm out. I'm out.
Yeah, no,
Sorcerer, number 12. After that.
After that, yeah.
Good lord.
Daddy's They're daddy's boys.
I think I spat. I think I froze and then I spat.
I did not think about how that would sound.
They're daddy's boys.
Top slot, number 1 pick, the Warlock class. I don't know how to begin to describe Warlock because they're so customizable. I think that's really the big hallmark of Warlock, and it's what makes them so unique and interesting on their own, and just like really, really cool when you start to like dribble in little bits of other classes. They're Eldritch Invocations, which is really what they get as a class because they don't get a whole lot of class features on their own, are super varied and give all sorts of little niche powers, some of which are really, really strong, and some of which are just all about like utility and role playing. They're very powerful spellcasters, but in a sort of narrow way.
With their spells, instead of having all the access to first, second, third, they're always casting big payload. Like, they're always at their top slot, but they only get a couple of spell slots. That being said, if you're in a game where the DM is not making it hard to do short rests, they get their spells back on a short rest. And that means that you can kind of go into each big encounter with your full payload ready for the day. You don't have to be like a wizard and kind of, I need to make sure I don't use this spell yet, because otherwise I won't have it for the next fight. One short rest and they're all back and you're ready to go.
It's invaluable in long dungeon crawls or adventures where you don't have the option to take long rests regularly. They're a very easy class to do melee builds with the Pact to the Blade feature. And then you're never without that melee weapon, which is really cool.
Pact to the Chain gives you a super, already find familiar, very powerful spell, and they get additional options for what the familiar can be, and more ways of using it makes it even stronger. And Pact to the Tome, different, very cool, more spellcastery, lots of cool options. You are literally making a deal with an otherworldly power, be it Cthulhu or the devil or fairy, but a big, cool, powerful fairy. They have lots of you can really, like you said, tailor them to fit in a lot of different roles, and they can be really, really powerful in each of those roles.
Oh, I get it. Wizard.
Yeah.
Because that is our number 1 class, is the Wizard. Another full spellcaster, intelligence-based. They have a spell book that they can add spells to, and then every morning they prepare a list of spells from everything they have in their book. Let's see, they've got a bunch of schools, like Abjuration, Necromancy, and the best one is Necromancy. There's other ones, though, right? Like Enchantment.
Enchantment.
Wizards have the largest list of spells that they can learn from in the game, and if they happen to find a spell written down out in the world, they can spend some money for some special magic ink and put it into their spell book.
All of the schools are really varied as well. Obviously, you're a fan of Necromancy, but Abjuration is really cool. Enchantment's really pretty powerful in a kind of nefarious way if you stop to think about it, like mind controlling people.
Well, I guess this is the outro. Thanks for watching, everybody. Do you agree with our top 12 list? Would you put them in a different order than we did? If so, please leave it down in the comments below. Like, subscribe, leave anything else down in the comments below that you'd like. Now, go forth, slay dragons, sling spells, roll dice, and enjoy your downtime activities.
There you go. I don't know how to get.
Hey, all you cool cats and kittens!
Whoa! This is how they made Star Trek.